In recent years, there's been a growing push at Riot to incorporate more queer representation across their various games. As a whole, I think this is a positive thing. While I've been somewhat vocal in the past about how I feel some of their attempts at inclusivity are kind of hollow and somewhat forced, I don't think this holds true for all of their attempts. So, as Pride Month draws to a close, let's take a look at some instances of representation that I think League actually does well, and briefly discuss why I think they work. This video was actually originally meant to rank both the good and the bad examples of queer rep in Runeterra, but not only would that take way more time, I'd rather keep this one from getting too negative if possible. Maybe I'll consider doing a follow-up later down the line, but for now, let's get into it. We'll begin with what is now probably the best-known queer pairing in the community, Caitlyn and Vi. It's no secret that this ship exploded in popularity due to the success of Arcane, but there have always been hints of it well before that show aired. The dynamic of the stern, no-nonsense police chief and the crude, punch-happy enforcer is a classic example of opposites attract. Now, it should be noted that Caitlyn and Vi's dynamic in their canon stories is less explicitly romantic than what we get in the show, but the differences between League's main universe and Arcane are a whole complicated mess unto themselves. Regardless of which continuity you want to follow, or if you even consider them different continuities at all, I think this ship is ultimately pretty solid. The characters have a lot of chemistry. They may butt heads at times, but ultimately know when to put their differences aside. Caitlyn keeps Vi in check, while Vi keeps Caitlyn grounded. They work great as partners in multiple senses of the word, and their relationship feels organic. Overall, no complaints. Cante and Tope are effectively the premise of Valmar and Kai done right. Two hunters in love that strive to protect their home from outside threats. Unlike Valmar and Kai, though, these two have proper personalities and stories. We actually get to read about their relationship, how it develops, and ultimately how it falls apart. Yeah, that last point is understandably a bit of a controversial issue for some. Riot's gone on record saying that they wanted to not only have Cassante be a gay character, but they also wanted to show a healthy relationship that continues even after the romance is over. Cante and Tope ultimately drifted apart due to complications involving a giant monster called the Cobra Lion, but they ultimately wound up back on good terms even if they no longer admire each other as they used to. While I can absolutely understand why people might be a tad upset that the ship was dead on arrival, I think the execution was handled really well, even if I'm not really sure why they felt that these two things had to be represented in the same character. At the end of the day, though, Cassante and Tope are more than just gay hunters. They're men with ambitions and goals that ultimately set them down different paths. One leading toward a rebellion against demigods, the other toward punching giant monsters in half. While I do think it kinda sucks that they can't do that as partners, this is still arguably the best guy-on-guy relationship League has ever gotten. So take that how you will. Okay, so this one gets a little bit complicated. The common belief of the fandom is that Taliyah is, or at least was, intended to be transgender. Unfortunately, she was released during a time when that sort of thing wasn't quite as well received, so the developers were never able to outright confirm it or officially make it canon. Now, I have personally been unable to find any official sources about this, so I've always been a little skeptical of the claims. But I also can't deny that there are a lot of implications in Taliyah's interactions with other champions. Now, there is an Easter egg that implies that Star Guardian Taliyah is trans, but whether that applies to the main universe as well is open for debate. While it has not and may never be officially confirmed, it does ultimately seem like Taliyah being transgender is viable. But why do I think this is a good example of representation if it's not even confirmed? Well, simply put, I actually kind of like that the story never makes a big deal out of it. Like, yeah, getting actual confirmation would be nice, but Taliyah's story isn't really about her gender. She's a young woman from the desert trying to protect the people she holds dear in an age of warring demigods and rampant eldritch abominations. Ultimately, whether or not Taliyah is trans is sort of a footnote in her story. I think it's nice that we can occasionally get queer characters that don't revolve entirely around being queer. It helps to demonstrate that at the end of the day, they're just people like anyone else, with goals, motivations, and struggles beyond whatever end of the spectrum they may lie on. So, yeah, ultimately Taliyah is a rock solid rep, in my opinion. And honestly speaking, even if it's not officially confirmed, I have a feeling that the fan canon is going to overshadow any official sources, anyways. The following are a few more champions who are heavily implied to be queer, but that aspect of their characters hasn't been explored enough for there to be a whole lot of conversation about it. Rel is hinted to be either bi or pan, as she seemingly crushes on both Set and Leona through her in-game interactions. Of course, she canonically has no reason to know either of these two, but the interactions do at least establish that she has a type, I suppose. Wouldn't mind seeing that explored further if/when they decide to finally move Rel's story forward, at least on the side of her rebellion. Fiora is a character who's rather open for debate. The only indication we get for her is a line from Swain saying that she's spurned many suitors and it's a wonder that people fail to see why. A lot of people seem to take this as a hint that Fiora is a lesbian, but I've always personally interpreted it to mean that she's ace/arrow. After all, Swain never said that all these spurned suitors were guys. Again, though, it's open for interpretation. Blitzcrank is a little bit of a weird case. Many people tend to refer to Blitz as a guy, and older versions of the character's bio did describe the golem as such, but the current canon bio actually uses exclusively gender-neutral pronouns when referring to Blitzcrank. Riot seems to want us to now think of Blitzcrank as non-binary, at least with the insistent use of they/them throughout the story. Honestly, though, how much you really want to count that when Blitzcrank is, a robot, I guess that's ultimately up to you. What is gender to a machine? So yeah, those were some of the more positive examples of queer representation in League, at least in my opinion. As stated before, I generally feel like a lot of League's attempts at inclusivity feel rather forced or poorly executed. But the examples talked about here show that they can do it well, or at least decently when they put some actual thought into it. There are some more examples from LOR that I could have touched on, but I wanted to focus this video exclusively on the champions from League itself. So what do you all think? Do you agree with my picks? Are there any characters you think should have been included in this video but weren't? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, politely please, and until next time, stay bright.